Good morning. My name is Marci Daniels, and I am the Director of Services to Students with Disabilities and Workability 4. I am co-presenting with my colleague, Consuelo Sanchez, who is SSD's Nighttime and Weekend Accommodations Coordinator. Today we are presenting Transitioning to Higher Education. The goals for today's presentation are: identify how high schools, community colleges, and universities can work together to better assist students matriculating to higher education. Understand expectations between high school, 2 and 4-year institutions, and how this impacts matriculating students with disabilities. Describe how the principles of universal design for learning can improve learning outcomes in the classroom. Specifically, the session will focus on contrasting disability legislation that governs K through 12 and post-secondary institutions, reviewing the differences in processes for determining disability eligibility, the importance of effective communication between post-secondary professionals, community college, and K through 12 colleagues, and how we can support one another to improve student outcomes. Readying our institutional environments to receive the target population using aspects of universal design for learning. So who are the students coming to college? The National Center for Education Statistics estimates that about 11% of undergraduates on college campuses report having a disability, which, if applied to CSUSB's current enrollment, would mean about 2,200 students. Emerging trends show a sharp rise in students diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, those affected by learning disabilities, anxiety, ADHD, and veterans with service-connected disabilities. Furthermore, 60% of high school students with disabilities matriculate to college. However, nearly 2/3 are unable to finish their degrees within 6 years. Let's take a moment to talk about veterans in higher education. According to the American Council on Education, nearly 80% of veterans attend public institutions. 85% of veterans enrolled in undergraduate programs are 24 years of age or older. Half are married and/or have children. Women make up 27% of veterans enrolled in post-secondary education. A total of 4 million veterans have reported having a service-connected disability. At CSUSB, about 68% of veterans enrolled report having a service-connected disability. 62% of veterans and military service members are the first in their family to attend college, compared to 43% of non-military. Moreover, veterans often attend multiple institutions while earning a degree. Common service-connected disabilities include amputations, spinal cord and skeletal injuries, hearing loss, PTSD, TBI, and depression. How do disability services offices connect to veterans who have service-connected disabilities but don't identify with or seek services that could benefit them? We need to perform more consistent outreach at the Campus Veteran Success Center and at mandatory orientations. Provide a supportive environment, scheduling regular office hours at the Campus Vet Center, assess assistive technology needs, provide socialization and leadership opportunities, such as involvement of vets in DS student advisory boards and disability sports festivals. Let's view a student veteran's experience transitioning from military to CSUSB.
So joined the military October 3rd, 2012. Went to basic for 3 months. Went to which is also called OSIT. So I did the 3 months of training as a 19th Delta Cavalry Scout. Got to my platoon February 28th, and then found out within 2 to 3 months that I was deploying to Afghanistan immediately. So did a month at Fort Polk of training for Afghanistan. Wasn't a lot, and went to Afghanistan in July. I believe it was July 15th of 2013. Um, did missions all the way till I came back February 23rd of 2014, and I got out February 3rd or 23rd, I believe, of 2015. One of my big challenges was trying to get out of the military mindset of that we're number one, we're alphas, that nothing can harm us, but as you get out, you start realizing that you no longer have your companions with you, that brotherhood. You start realizing that you have your family only. You start kind of trying to figure out your own life, and trying to transition is kind of hard because you can no longer, say what you want, do what you want almost, and it just becomes a little bit more difficult to try, like, being out of school for years and trying to get back into like math or English. It kind of becomes a little bit of a hazard. The resources that are available on campus. One was the VSC, the Veteran Success Center, and SSD office, Services to Students with Disabilities. I used these two services the most. The VSC helped me get my GI Bill and my BA8 scoring, making sure I filled out the statement of responsibility, making sure that I had free printing, I had services necessary, counseling as well, which I never attended. Then SSD helped me with my financial aid, helped me with note taking if I needed those services. After I met with my counselor, Carlos, at the time. So those are two services I used, and that's how I used them. I was connected to the disability office through Marci Daniels, who helped me get with one of my counselors, Carlos at the time, in order to help fix my financial aid and to help me get note-taking services. That's how I was connected to SSD. One of the main difficulties was trying to get out of the military mindset, as I had mentioned earlier. Trying to figure out that, I'm no longer, required to be the tough guy who doesn't have to get help. So it's hard for me to ask for help, to get help, to even go to the VA, to, ask for help with SSD, stuff like that. Transitioning back to education from being told what to do, how to do it, to actually doing everything on your own. So those are some of the difficulties that I faced trying to transition back into it, as well as, trying to be more appropriate with what I say. I got a lot of support while I was here from the VSC and SSD. So one thing I would say that actually would have been helpful would have been, a little bit more of like, oh, hey, you're no longer in the military kind of thing. Like, yeah, I got that mindset. You gotta, like, more of like someone that would have pushed me a little bit more. Pushed me a little bit more to be out of that mindset. It took me 2 years to get out of the mindset that, I don't need help, I don't need this, I don't need that. It took me 2 years. So that kind of, a little bit more of a push would have helped me.
So I wanted to take a moment to discuss the trends that CSUSB's Disabilities Office is encountering. During the 2018-2019 academic year, our office had 1,016 students utilizing services. This represents a 20% increase in students over the prior year. Moreover, our office experienced a 30% increase in the number of students deemed eligible for services during the year. Also important to note, the number of students diagnosed with a psychological disability increased by almost 24%, and those with a learning disability rose by 20%. Let's review the differences in disability requirements between high schools and higher ed. So in high school, education is a right and must be accessible. In college, education is not a right. Students must go through an admissions process and meet certain criteria to be admitted. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, at the high school level entitles or guarantees disability services and accommodations to students with disabilities. At the college level, the applicable laws are the Americans with Disabilities Act Amendments Act and Sections 504 and 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. At high school, IDEA is about success in the least restrictive environment. In college, the ADA 504 and 508 is about access. In high school, fundamental modifications of curricula is possible. At the college level, modifications are not required. In high school, the school district is responsible for identifying disability and developing an IEP. At college, students must self-disclose disability and request accommodations. An IEP is not recognized. In high schools, personal services such as a personal care attendant, OT, aide are required and funded by the school. In college, personal services are not required. In high school, the school district is responsible for the evaluation process leading to the development of an IEP. In college, students are responsible for providing their own evaluations and documentation. Let's take a moment to clarify the advocacy role. In high school, students are supported by the IEP team, which includes parents, teachers, and administrators. In college, students must request accommodations from the Disability Services Office. High school, the school is responsible for arranging accommodations and modifications in order to provide the least restrictive environment. In college, students must self-disclose for and request accommodations from the DS provider. In high school, parents have access to student records and grades until the age of 18. In college, parents have no access to students without a signed written consent beginning at age 18. In high school, the IEP advocates for the student. In college, students advocate for themselves with support as needed from the DS provider. In high school, the IEP team meets periodically with teachers and parents to discuss students' educational progress. In college, faculty members seldom, if ever, interact with parents. Students are expected to address issues with faculty directly. Let's look at the clarification of academic expectations. In high school, classes meet every day and are usually 45 minutes to 90 minutes long. In college, classes may meet 1 to 5 times per week and range from 50 minutes to 4 hours. In high school, class size is approximately 25 to 30 students. But as we know in college, class size may range from 20 students to 300 plus students. In high school, teachers will remind students of assignments and due dates. In college, professors will expect students to read, save, and consult the syllabus. In high schools, assignments may be shortened or modified. In college, assignments are not modified or shortened. In high school, memorizing facts may be sufficient to pass exams. In college, harder work required for earning good grades, more major writing assignments, and critical thinking. In high school, lighter workload, slower pace, less stress. In college, increased workload, faster pace, higher stakes, course completed in 10 weeks for a quarter or 16 weeks in a semester. In high school, the schedule is set by the school. In college, students are responsible for designing a schedule of courses, type of course, time of day, number of courses, etc. In high school, there's daily contact with teachers. In college, access to professors is only on the day of classes, during office hours, or by appointment. In high school, there's many opportunities for grades. In college, there's fewer task graded opportunities and more information to recall. In high school, the monitoring of progress is done by others. In college, students' progress may not be monitored. Students need to self-monitor their own progress. In high school, teachers can help students and provide support. In college, students must independently seek additional and supplementary sources of information and seek academic support services. In high school, classes meet in 1 or 2 buildings. In college, classes meet in many different buildings. So mobility is often the responsibility of the student. Let's take a moment to view Daniel Carr's experience matriculating from high school to CSUSB.
My high school experience was pretty basic. It wasn't too much, although senior year is always hectic and dealing with trials and tribulations through that. But other than that, it was kind of just a smooth ride through. It impacted my high school experience pretty significantly because, when I first broke my back, it was my junior year, and I was getting scouted from schools, for course, for football. And unfortunately, after breaking my back, I lost the scouts and lost people from actually communicating with me for that. I was in a wheelchair for a while, and I was actually paralyzed for a long period of time. And I was in a wheelchair for about 6, 7 months, and it was very hard. It was harder to readjust my life back to how it used to be, and I knew it was never going to be the same from then, but following through and just pushing along, I was able to walk again and then be able to go throughout my senior year and being able to walk and being the drum major for my band and just trying to be the best I could be in that period of time, although it was just very effective of like me mentally and everything. Oh man, I wish I would have known that how communication works with the school and like through the professors and like through SSD. When I came, I kind of just, because my high school teacher told me about SSD, and from then on I kind of was just like, okay, well, got the feel from it from there. but just the communication between the teachers and the S&D department is just so like like I wish I would have known back like then, because it would have made me commit to the school even faster, just because how Marci and everybody just runs the program and just runs the department. It's just always feeling like super at home, and it's always just helped like with the transition and everything from being with the disability from like my high school and then doing it in college, because in high school it was kind of like they just took care of it just because they had to. Over here it felt really more genuine than ever. It felt like they actually did care to help me to actually do this. I was connected through my high school teacher. She's an alumni here from the school, and with her, she kind of directed me, helped me get to where I needed to be here and talk to who I needed to talk to, filled out all the forms I need to fill out to actually help me get my accommodations that I needed, so then I wouldn't come in not knowing what to do or not knowing who to talk to, and help me succeed really in that way of communication, helping me be able to get my accommodations I needed to be able to actually sit through classes and sit through lectures. Well, the transition I really faced was like my mobility. It's hard to get around for me because I can't stand for very long periods of time, and I can't really walk for long periods of time. So for me, it was more of like getting around and things like that. As you know, high school it's a little bit easier just because classrooms are like right next door. Everything's like in like a little circle, it feels like. And like when you get to college, it's like spread it out like miles across campus, and it's always just different. And sometimes it's like I had to take the break, I had to take the rest, but you know, through my accommodations and me talking to my teachers, they know that if I come to school late or I get to my class late, it's not because like, oh, I'm horsing around or doing something. It's actually because it's hard for me to get to point A to point B sometimes. Some of the support, just more like showing the direction of like where to go and like helping decide like what kind of we want to do. Because I know in college we kind of all find ourselves and find like what we want to be and what we want to actually start pursuing. And it wasn't like in high school, teachers really didn't care to talk to you about, oh, well, if you want to become a band teacher or if you want to become a physical therapist. It was more like that wasn't really talked about. It was more like just the main, like, oh, you want to become a teacher or you want to become a psychologist. And it's like, and I like how some of the colleges do like the outreaches to us, because it showed us that's like there's more to this college. Like there's all these departments, all these things, and just like that additional support is knowing what campuses offer and what actually is offered at the schools and how are departments and things like that. Because you know, it's one thing kind of when some departments actually come out and talk, but then when you get here and it's like a whole nother thing, or compared to when every department's talking, and you get to just kind of tour everything to see what every like department is, and like from like the transgender women's facilities to like the Title IX to everything, to actually see what support is offered for us. So then we're not kind of just wondering, like walking around wondering like what's going on, or like what do we, like where can we find it, where we kind of already know, like so that we know that, hey, if I do have a problem, I can go here, and it'll help me actually find what I need to help with my solution.
Let's take a moment to talk about students coming from high school and community college. Do we have any higher ed DS in the session? Use your reaction to raise your hand, because we at the university level need to dialogue with our high school community college partners about the critical need for our students to take the right courses. By this, I mean high school students need to take college prep classes, and at both the community college and high school level, classes that fulfill transfer requirements. We must also stress the importance of students developing time management, test taking, note taking, reading, and other studying strategies before they matriculate. We need to ensure that student psychoeducational testing, other evals, and medical documentation has been updated. Because at the higher ed level, students must self-disclose their disability and request accommodations. Students must know how to self-advocate so that they understand and are able to articulate their disability and how it impacts their learning. Communicate their strengths and needs and understand how strategies and accommodations support their learning. Develop negotiation skills so that they can interact with professors, staff, and roommates. The IEP team, coupled with the student's parents, should encourage the student to take an active role in their high school IEP meetings and 504 plan. Student parents need to understand the process too. The difference between the high school IEP and 504 plan, and how accommodations are approved at the higher ed level. Who is their children's DS point of contact, and what level of access they will have to their child's information, minor versus adult. How will the faculty be informed about the student's disabilities and accommodation plan? The financial aid process to include Parent Plus loans, DOR, and scholarships. In-classroom assistance such as class aides and what their function is, their responsibility for providing a PCA. Student responsibilities in regards to meeting with faculty, seeking academic support services. Parents should be aware of the campus process for medical emergencies. Will they be notified? How can they be notified?
So, in response to higher education, we must support students with documented disabilities in their transition to higher education. We need to collaborate with K through 12 IEP teams and disability service offices to streamline the successful transition of the student to higher ed. We also need to connect students to campus supports and resources as soon as possible, train and support faculty to embed universal design to course pedagogies and content delivery. So what can we do? We can continue to establish a better connection with admissions and enrollment to make our institutions disability friendly. We can meet with academic faculty on how to embed principles of UDL into classroom and web experiences, and work with high school and community college partners to streamline the students' transition and to ensure that they have the communication, self-advocacy, critical thinking, and negotiation skills, and understand the processes and how to request accommodations at the receiving institution before they matriculate. So what should we do? We need to prepare ourselves to engage, recruit, and enroll this population of students. We need to do the work throughout our own institutions and with our K through 12 and community college partners to support their success, retention, and persistence. We need to respond with approaches that are welcoming and supportive of diverse learners. So why is this important? It's so students don't fall through the cracks. According to the Hetchinger report, 94% of high school students with learning disabilities access support, while only 17% of college students do the same. Ultimately, what is the outcome if our outreach is unsuccessful and our services are unresponsive? It is a negative impact on persistence, retention, completion, and lower graduation rates. Remember the statistic that was shared with you earlier. 60% of high school students with disabilities matriculate to college. However, nearly 2/3 are unable to finish their degrees within 6 years. So let's take a moment to view Susan Trapp and her experience from transitioning from community college to CSUSB.
My community college experience started, I was a non-traditional student, of course, and then when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I'm a first-generation college student, and so there wasn't a lot of people that I knew that could answer the questions that I had, and so I just started and kept asking questions as I went along, and it was a good experience. I learned a tremendous amount. I was there for a pretty long time in order to get where I needed to go to this next level. But it was, I noticed that asking the questions is really the key. I was connected through a professor that I had. He was a math professor, and he noticed that I would get very anxious during tests and I would be distracted by other students. And when he noticed that, he recommended that I talk to a disabilities office, mostly for testing accommodations. As far as the disabilities office, I think it would have been very helpful to know how to transfer the information from from the community college to a university. That would have been very helpful. I have been connected with the disabilities office by being on the student advisory committee, just helping to come up with ideas and different questions, various questions that other students might also have, and brainstorming in the meeting with the administration to help to streamline whatever needs to, be changed or what would work best for the student. I also have been a note taker in the past for various classes, and also I utilize their facilities myself. Well, the disability office at the community college, they don't have as much funding, and so their office it runs efficiently, although there's not as many people as such as here at Cal State, where the funding has a little bit more of an impact as far as the accommodations that are offered. The challenges that I faced, I think number one is the technology portion of it. Everything's computerized. I didn't have a grasp on it as much as I do now, and so that was a challenge. Also, to go from one office in the community college setting to an office at the university, the transfer of that information, there's not always steps to go along with the transfer of the information, and so it makes it a little more difficult. You just have to keep asking questions to keep moving forward.
Okay. Universal design for learning in the classroom. Why? Well, for one, it provides for inclusiveness, and two, allows students to utilize their strengths, and three, engages and empowers students by providing them options as well as opportunities for success. Examples of UDL include offering multiple delivery methods that engage all learners, flexible curriculum that is accessible to all students, content that is inclusive of diversity to appeal to all students instead of just a target group, utilizing multiple methods to assess student learning, and faculty awareness for disability-related accommodations. So for some UDL strategies that may be useful in a classroom, taking an example, what would be useful in a physics class? One would be giving clear notification of expectations, establish routines and expectations, lay initial rules for group work, offer various options for demonstrating competency and knowledge acquisition, offer students several means to access course materials, such as through office hours, explain Blackboard and other similar online delivery systems for class materials. So where do we go from here? Within our institutions, we need to create a strong and accessible website, ensure pictures have alternate texts and videos are accessible, such as closed captioning, introduce UDL in the classroom, provide faculty trainings on UDL resources and information, reach out to faculty to support the process of improving the experience for diverse learners, collaborate with campus services that will be able to support the transitional experience for students coming from high school or community college, offer new student orientations for students with disabilities. With our stakeholders, we can reach out to high school and community colleges to establish what they can do to prepare these students with disabilities for success. We can create forums and panels to answer family and student questions, spread awareness, provide support and information for special and emerging populations, and offer UDL training through college-wide professional development initiatives. So that was quite a bit of information to cover. So now we're going to take some time and answer some of the questions that you have submitted. Okay. So Marci, how do you feel SSD is a powerful, do you feel SSD is a powerful force in pushing back against some of the history of discrimination present in higher education?
The role of SSD has continued to evolve on campus, from service provision, accessibility, and barrier removal to social justice, civil rights advocacy, and the promotion of social consciousness and inclusion to include actively challenging current systems of oppression and exclusion on campus. Even our branding now has a social justice lens. Our Abilities Define You campaign features posters with iconic individuals with disabilities, which are prominently displayed throughout campus to include the campus marquee. Moreover, biographies about the icons have been posted with the hashtag abilities define you on SSD and Wave social media sites. So check it out. Phase 3 of the campaign features posters of SSD students with disabilities. So that's been a huge benefit to bringing awareness to our students on campus. So Consuelo, what are the biggest challenges you feel our department faces ensuring access to all students, especially during COVID?
Well, the largest challenges have been students who are temporarily disabled because of COVID-19 and students with sensory disabilities. SSD has worked steadfastly with faculty and departments to ensure that their environments and work product is accessible. One example was the quick adaptation to Zoom at the beginning of spring term 2020. Not only did students need to learn and adapt to Zoom, but interpreters and captionists did too. SSD often uses vendors for interpreting and captioning services, so they don't have access to MyCoyote, and we had to do a lot of work with the faculty to ensure that they could access the links. Assignments and presentations also provided challenges. For example, a student who is deaf may need an ASL interpreter to voice for a group presentation, and the interpreter needs time to practice with the student. We encountered challenges like this in the fall term when a professor asked students to record themselves and present the recording at the next class session. We had to quickly find an interpreter, and the student and the interpreter had to practice. There was also a profoundly hard of hearing student in the class, so SSD had to caption that video of the presentation, which we did not complete until 10 p.m. Marci, so do you consider CSUSB fully inclusive of the disabled student population?
No, CSUSB is not fully inclusive as there are still challenges with accessibility and the inclusion of individuals with disabilities in the decision-making processes. However, we are making great strides. The largest challenge is faculty and staff knowingly procuring, producing, and utilizing materials and creating learning environments that are not accessible. An example is the campus transitioning to a web-based map software referred to as Campus Maps that is highly visual in nature and not accessible to students with low vision or blind who will not be able to use the wayfinding feature. Another example are instructors telling students with disabilities to switch to an online section of their course instead of the live version they enrolled in, which violates federal disability legislation and the CSU Executive Order 1111. Consuelo, how is accessibility decided when creating new buildings and redesigning older buildings on campus?
Well, at CSUSB, the facilities planning and management uses a vendor who reviews architectural designs to ensure that they meet ADA standards. Project managers also meet with the SSD director to review designs for compliance with ADA as well as the California building codes. Most recently, SSD was asked to provide guidance for updating the existing performing arts building and the building of the new theater. Concerns included whether or not the renovations of the performing arts building need to include other areas of the building being brought up to the 2010 standards for accessible design, and whether or not having a wheelchair in the orchestra section of the new theater meets the standard of having substantially equivalent to or better than seating for the other spectators clause in section 221.2.3 and 802.2 of the standards.
Consuelo, as the assistive technology guru of SSD, what are your thoughts on serving folks with challenges not resolved by assistive technology, for instance, who may need academic coaching?
Um, well, actually, many of our students have disabilities that do require the use of assistive technology and academic support, like academic coaching. They're not mutually exclusive. Part of the role of SSD counselors is to provide coaching and to connect students with on and off campus resources. Counselors can check academic progress to include grades and connect students to resources on campus like the Writing Center and Tutoring Center. SSD and Workability 4 also facilitate a wide variety of programs to build student academic skill sets from tech talks to study skills, time management, and note taking. SSD also offers tutoring services. Marci, What do you see as the leadership structure at SSD?
So as the only MPP at SSD, I see my role as professionally developing the staff to build their knowledge and skills to ensure that services and activities are carried out at an extremely high level. As we all know, mentorship takes time and commitment, but it is a valuable and rewarding experience for both me as the director and the staff as they continue to build their skill sets in new areas and teach me new things. I also like to surround myself with talented individuals who bring their own ideas and opinions because it pushes the department to continue to evolve in new ways, such as our social media platforms and events. So,
So in addition to that, do you feel that the current staffing numbers are an adequate amount to effectively serve this population of students?
well, for the 2020-2021 budget year, SSD was cut 2 staff positions. At the same time, SSD's student enrollment has increased on average 20% per year, while the proportion of CSUSB total enrollment increased slightly from 3.5% to 5% over the same period. Moreover, our mission has continued to expand beyond setting accommodations to providing holistic services that are based on a social work model. Most staff, including myself, wear multiple hats. So, for example, for me, in addition to overseeing 2 departments, I case manage the deaf and hard of hearing caseload to include the scheduling of all captionists and interpreters on campus. So it's a challenge, but where there's a will, there's a way. So Consuelo, how does SSD advertise and market our department, including outreach?
Well, SSD actually has an 8-page outreach strategy plan that allows us to advertise and market the department and its services. It outlines 10 initiatives that relate directly to our mission and receive priority status for the department. And they include regional and national recognition, student communication, internal communication, community service, identity and branding, diversity, equity and inclusion, research and outreach, awareness days, and development communications.
So Consuelo, are services for students with disabilities provided based on an IEP or doctor's specialist note?
For SSD, accommodations are determined and approved by counselors based upon the documentation submitted with the student's application packet and an interactive process with the student's assigned counselor. While accommodations are not rubber stamped off an IEP, we do use it as a guide when setting accommodations. The accommodation plan is a fluid process, so it can actually change through a student's academic career at CSUSB. So our last question, Marci, this one's near and dear to your heart. Does your office affiliate with the Veteran Success Center? And do you offer services for veterans with PTSD?
SSD works in close partnership with the Veteran Success Center. As an Army veteran myself and the inaugural director of the VSC, I have a passion for serving veterans. Our counselors have been through the VetNet Ally program, and we serve both veterans and non-veterans that are diagnosed with PTSD. So as Consuelo mentioned, this concludes our presentation today. We are honored to be able to present to your class. Thank you for inviting us. If you have any additional questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll ensure that we get a written response to Dr. Swart. Have a great day. And once again, thank you for having SSD present to you this morning.